warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat datang di podcast FKIP Sekolah Jawara Indonesia. Oke, saya Untirta atau biasa dipanggil Ibu Yuvi, dosen dari Pendidikan Fisika yang saat ini jadi host dari podcast kita kali ini. Nah, saya nggak sendiri, saya ditemanin sama Ibu Septi Kurniasi, MPD, dosen dari biotek, ya, dosen dari Pendidikan IPA. Halo Bu Septi.
Halo Bu Yuvi.
Oke, gimana kabarnya?
Nice.
Oke. So, kali ini kita akan ngobrol-ngobrol di podcast ini mengenai bincang-bincang pendidikan tentunya. Nah, kali ini spesial ya Bu ya, karena kita merayakan ulang tahun FKIP yang ke-43 sudah sangat senior ya.
Senior.
Nah, kali ini kita berdua kedatangan tamu spesial dari luar negeri, jauh-jauh datang ke Indonesia ya, dari Denmark. Bu Septi, itu kalau naik pesawat tuh 15 jam.
Wow.
Jauh banget, capek banget gitu ya. Dan alhamdulillah demi FKIP tercinta, beliau datang ke Indonesia, khususnya ke FKIP untuk ikut merayakan acara Baten Girang. Nah, langsung saja kita sapa ya, Profesor Henriette Holmegaard. Halo, nice to meet you, nice to have you here. Yeah, so Sobat FKIP, kita akan melakukan podcast ini dalam bahasa Indonesia dan juga berbahasa Inggris ya. Okay, so yes, Professor, thank you so much for coming, right? So,
Thank you.
Okay.
Prof. Henriette, welcome to Indonesia.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And I would like to asking you about what is your first impression when you come to Indonesia and come to our campus in Banten?
Yeah, it has been such overwhelming experience. People have been so nice. I've been felt very welcome here at the university, and also I really like the area. It's so beautiful. So I'm very thankful for the opportunity to come so far and experience all this and meet so many nice people. It's been really nice.
Okay. So, by the way, why do you choose this campus? So, any particular reason, or what is the story behind that? How you know this campus, especially this faculty and teacher training?
Yeah, so there's, I think, several facets of that. Like, I think personal connection is key, and you have been studying in Denmark, Untirta, so knowing we were reaching out to each other and exploring potential collaboration, and the first step to that is visiting and also learning about different contexts. And for me and my research, context is really interesting because I'm interested in diversity, and I know here in Indonesia you have a huge diversity of different students. So I think actually I could learn a lot from coming to Indonesia, also to kind of develop my theories even further, because they are developed in a very Western context. So I think learning from an Indonesian context can pose some new questions to the work that I'm doing that can develop that further. So that's my hope of coming here.
So actually the general theme is diversity, right? You are interested with diversity, and that invites you to come to Indonesia, especially to this campus.
Yeah, so that's one of
interesting.
That's one of the things that I'm researching. I'm also researching students' choices in general, and we will get back to that. But diversity is one big thing.
We know that maybe all of the audience also can take a look to Professor Henriette publication, right? Your expertise is in science identity. We would like to know more, right, about science identity. Could you tell us more? What is science identity?
Yeah, because it sounds so strange. What has identities to do with science? And I think the general perception of identities is we have an inner core that we carry carry around a stable and layered experience in it, but that's not actually the way we work with identities. Identities, we are interested in the social aspects. So who can you become in science classrooms? Who can you see yourself becoming? How are you recognized? Are you recognized as someone sciencey or not? What is celebrated in the classroom? What practices do you need to do to kind of be recognized as someone belonging within that context? So basically, we can cook it down to two important factors, which is how do you see yourself in science settings, and how are you seen as someone belonging in science settings? So these social elements are key to my research.
Okay, so how do we see ourselves as science persons?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Okay.
And some and the whole thing is that some students struggle to see themselves as science students, right?
But it makes me want to know, is there any criteria that makes us, oh, I am science people? No, you are not science people. So is there any criteria for that?
Yeah, but they are culturally embedded, right? And that's why they change from physics to biology, for example, but also from classroom to classroom. But there are some traits that goes across, at least in Denmark, and that's why I'm interested to learn how it is in Indonesia. In Denmark, for example, there's this idea that in science, there you are intelligent. In history, you're just like good. But in science, you show intelligence. And for some students, how do you do that? In particular, if you don't have a science family or background or resources. So there is some interesting stuff there, and also around how the teaching is organized and how the teaching promotes certain aspects and push others out. That has also to do with who can actually see themselves as a science person here. Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk in broader context. Can you share your personal experience where you had to challenge a gender bias or kind of traits in your scientific journey?
Yeah, in my own journey, I think for me it's more kind of social background that matters, because I'm not from an academic background. So my whole journey has been also like figuring out the codes of how to navigate. It didn't come natural. And I think for some other students that has a family, that has a lot of education experience, it's easier to know the codes of how to participate. Sometimes, at least when you come up in senior high and higher education, some of these codes are very implicit. They're not elaborated. So no one, at least in Denmark, says, okay, here we do not say what we expect you to read, you need to figure out yourself. If that's the case in some classroom, or here participation means this and this. This is not a good question. You need to prepare questions at home, for example. All these tacit codes, for some, it goes without saying. And for others, they just need to learn without all these invisible codes. And for me, that was my experience, that I needed to navigate that. And I think that's also what I use in my research. And I think that also goes with gender. Here with gender, I think it's more about like who is like perceived as a real scientist, and at least in a Western context, sometimes that very much associated with male. Like the way you kind of some students, when I interview them, even say that, okay, but if you're like interested in how, for example, what you wear, how you look, it's not real sciencey. So if you look nice, you're not maybe nice. You're not belonging to the science community. So there's a lot of tacit codes of like who is in and who is out that we perhaps are unaware of.
I see. And then how do the initiative can be promoting diversity in university or classroom context to develop the science identity to our students?
Yeah, how we can do that. So I think a very important step for teachers, so if you're a teacher listening here, I think it's important to think of how we connect to different student background.
How we connect the science with different student background.
The examples we provide, the experiments we do. Sometimes we kind of presume that the students can translate that themselves to their everyday life.
Yes.
But for students without what we call science capital is the resources we have from home or out of school activities or whatever assigned you, surround you with. Students with high science capital, they can do these connections by themselves. They can do an experiment and say, oh, this looks like what we have at home in my freezer or whatever. But students without that, they think, oh, this is school, and when I go home, there's no physics. They cannot do that connection. So I think a first step to promote diversity is that we really try to connect with different students to show them that science is also important for them and their lives and their families, no matter what background they come from.
Okay, so is it interesting to know that, so science identity, is it something that can be trained when someone maybe getting into the school, like the first year of elementary school, for example, or it come from the gene or the character of the parents? There's something that already in themselves.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Okay, so I would like to know what that.
Yeah, thank you. And that ties back to what I said in the beginning. We see science identities as social, so yes, it can be changed.
Oh, it can be changed.
It can. It's not in the genes. It's not stable. It's what we do in everyday settings that promote, welcomes students' identities in science. So here it's about getting students to believe that science is for them. So science is not, we tend to, there's this discourse, there's this saying, at least in Denmark, that science is very difficult. It's only for the very smart students. So instead we should say, but science is not difficult. It's for everyone can do science. So try to make a broader kind of setting that invites more students into that, could promote and support their identities to see, okay, it's also for someone like me.
Okay.
So it's about how we teach and what we recognize and promote in the classroom is important for welcoming different students.
One thing that I recognize is creating the secure environment for them to learning science. And how can we, as a teacher or a lecturer, to promote that kind of environment so that our students have the channel for them, their curiosity?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. And our first step, I think, is to implement that in teacher training, that we become aware of some of these in an exclusion mechanisms, so they're not playing behind our back. And I think also that you said, how do we
facilitate the safe
environment? Yes, thank you. Because I think sometimes in science classroom we are very fast to say right or wrong. So instead of doing that validation, or that is closing the discourse in the classroom. So it's not that we are not allowed, of course we need to say at some point what is right or wrong, but allow students discussion and thinking before we do that. So we don't have like very short interaction with teacher asking a question, students saying something, and then then it will close down the other students' ideas. So sometimes opening up the space for a kind of a broader dialogue, I think, is important to also ensure that all students get to participate. So it's not only in Denmark, at least, it's the 5 in the front who like raise their hand. So if we want more student engagement, we also need to ensure that everyone actually have a chance to participate without us closing and saying, no, that was not right. No, that was not right. No. Because that will stop their their sense of feeling of this is for me.
Okay.
If they're like neglected all the time, right? So yeah.
So
It's an
yeah.
important question. Thank you.
I would like to know way before the science identity comes up, how long you have been studying this issue, and then what the first thing that invite you or trigger you to
Yes.
learn about this?
Yeah.
Because actually it's already happened with us, surrounding us, but we just don't really think about that.
No.
Now you come with this specific issue, and it relates to us what's
Yeah.
happened here,
Yeah.
especially in our faculty here. So what first thing that trigger you?
Yeah.
Why do you want to learn science identity?
Yeah, I think it's since my very first study as a PhD student. I'm doing a lot of qualitative studies, so I interview the same students again and again and again. So I follow them over time, and I followed that cohort from secondary school, senior high, and into higher education, university. And I could see so much was happening that not had to do. I studied their choices, whether they choose or not choose science, and I could see this is nothing to do with interest. At that time, most of the research were pointing to then are students interested or not? That's if they're interested, they will choose science. If not, they will not. So how can we spark the interest? And I could see students being interested in science but not wanting to go there of other reasons. And I figured out the concepts that were offered through the research was like limited in understanding some of these choice processes. So I attended to identities to understand that, and it has been a growing field in the European Science Education Association. I think it's the biggest special interest group now, people studying science identities in many different ways. So I think it has grown since then and developed since then. But my first encounter was that I kind of lacked.
Okay.
I couldn't kind of capture what I wanted, and I found this concept very helpful in order to do so.
Okay, that's interesting that you mentioned about how to assess our student. And in your opinion, what role the mentorship can be representation play for supporting the young generation in science?
I think it's a really important issue because I think part of identities is that both can you see yourself and be seen, but also can you have access to imagining yourself as a scientist, someone working in science in the future. And if you do not have the resources to do so, how can you imagine a future? If you do not know anyone working in science environments, how can you then see yourself as someone in the very end doing so? So having mentorship and representation is one way, but mentor can also work as supportive factors to support students. And perhaps it's not that important that everyone go into science. Most importantly, perhaps it is that they can relate to science and use science in their life. And here mentorship can also be a nice bridge, I think.
So do you think is it important, Professor, to expose the student with diverse environment of scientists?
Yeah, diverse environment of scientists, and also some diversity in the teaching to represent science in different ways, because it might connect differently to different students. So we need to think of how both the curriculum, the way we teach, the teaching setting, to kind of get to different students. And the teachers here will know their students best, because I think in Denmark also some of the examples we provide, students say you need to know stuff about science to be good in science. You need to know that in advance of going into the classroom. And it shouldn't be so. You should be in school to learn science. So I think the teacher have a role in showing that all of the students have science in their life, also the ones that cannot see that.
Talking about the curricula, how can science curricula can promoting or design to reflect the diverse identity and contribution?
Yeah, I think there need to be some openings in the curriculum, and often the curriculum is very tight, which restrict the teacher in terms of reaching out to different students. Sometimes the teacher might think, oh, it would be nice to go out of the classroom to do something, but it's difficult because of time restrictions. So I think sometimes the biggest enemy is all the things that is put into the curriculum of restrictions, because the teacher will know his or her students well enough to know how to bridge that. It can also be, for example, something is happening in the world that is sciencey that would be nice to draw into the classroom, or something happening in their local community that would be a really nice option to connect to the curriculum. But you cannot as a teacher, because you know, oh, next chapter is something else. So that flexibility, I think, is important to capture as when you, as a teacher, experience, oh, now all the students are talking about ChatGPT. Could we take that into the classroom, or whatever it is that can connect to their different backgrounds?
Okay, so it's so personalized education, right?
Yeah, somehow. And of course, we cannot personalize to everyone, but we can try to think of opening the box a little bit more. Because if we do not think about this at all, we tend to provide examples from our own life. And the examples from our own life will resonate with some students, but there will be some students that we then never will get to. So it's about thinking a bit broader. Of course, we cannot personalize science all the time, but we can. I think it's important that we consider this, because else we'll lose some. We will communicate and we will teach to a specific small group of students, and they probably will go into science, but the rest of the students would like whatever, and they will not even be able to connect science to their own lives. And we also want informed citizens. So I think in that sense it's important.
Okay. So, Professor, right now it's a common issue is when we have a new student, for example, they have so much energy at the beginning of the year. They're really excited about that, and during the time they lose motivation. At the end of the first year, they just cut off science. They move to another field. So from your perspective, why is it happening like that? Or maybe one of your research is talk about that. So maybe you can explore or elaborate the idea. What should we do then to prevent to become worse?
Okay, so there's a lot of things going on in that process, because I've studied that process with longitudinal following students. One important thing is that if we want to understand this, we cannot ask the students who already dropped out, because they will say one explanation at that point, but that would not be the explanation that provided over time, because I have followed them over time, so I can see how their narrative develop. I think one key is to understand, why did they in the first place choose the program? What are their expectations? Because sometimes the students come into a program and they're like, why are we presented with math? I did not know we had so many math courses. So I think the first big step is to ensure that expectations are made clear, also for the study program. And also study programs, sometimes when they promote and they make commercials for the program, they show all the funny stuff, but perhaps the funny stuff is at the third year. So how should first year students know that they have to wait a long time for this to happen? So it's also about how we tell our subject disciplinary identities to the students. How do we draw students in, and do we then actually keep that promise, but also to make students' expectation, have them share the expectations in the beginning, to kind of also tell them, yeah, you will get to that, but it will not be now, because first you will have the math course, and we do this because blah, 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 blah. So be a bit more explicit about it. And sometimes the things we put into first year are quite random. sometimes it's because that teacher could teach that course, or because they always had math first, and so perhaps we could also think about how do we actually design the first year to meet new students and welcome new students. So there's a lot of facets to that question, but it's important not to wait to ask them too late, because then they already said, oh, this is not for me, and perhaps it was not for me from the beginning, and then they will just make a story in the very end about, oh, I dropped out, but I also considered something else, and I was not sure in the very first place. So you need to kind of follow that development.
So the suggestion for us as the Department of Education, I mean physics department or maybe science department, we need to follow their developing of thinking, how they develop their thought about physics, for example, also for science, for example.
Yeah, to also to see, does every student at the same course kind of think, okay, now I'm leaving. So perhaps there is something going on. So listening to why some of the reasons that the students they share.
But interesting thing that you said that when we advertise or want to drag more students into our department, you said that is it good to say what is really going on in physics education, for example? For example, at the first year you will learn this, and then they will get the real picture what they are going to learn after they get into that university.
And you can say a bit provocative. If you think it's too boring, if you tell them the truth, perhaps you should change what you're doing. Because we did the same at our university. We have this discussion, right? And some students they apply and they think, oh, now we are going in the lab, but then the lab course is further down the alley. But could they perhaps have some small lab exercises in the beginning if we think this is a key thing for our subject? So if we think this is key, how do we ensure that students do not drop out before they met the core subject, what we think is the important stuff?
So it means we have to provide them with full information, the nice one and also maybe we can say the scariest one.
And also perhaps when you consider some of the science study programs are very hierarchical. So you in the very end get to do stuff yourself, perhaps. First you need to learn the basics, but perhaps we could think of having small spaces where you kind of also do the more explorative science. So I think thinking about that would also promote some meaningful courses for students.
Especially at the beginning, with the first year of study, right?
And you can figure out, oh, it's always third semester or something. Perhaps you can say, oh, they are tired at that point. In Denmark, we have autumn. It's so dark all the time. So perhaps we could put some nice stuff in there to kind of keep students. So it's a balance of all these things.
So for the young generation, as someone that working in science for a lot of the time, what advice you can give to the young generation that feeling that they are not fit with the image of scientists of science world?
I think one thing is that if you have seen like one bad example that kind of made you don't want to go there, perhaps science is so many different things, as to kind of try to explore the breadth of science. You can also, as a young person, surf the internet and see different examples. Perhaps science, there is something sciencey for you. It could be one way of going. And I think in Denmark we have what we call open house university, so you can, as a student, come and visit and see whether it's something for you. Follow you have a day where you can follow other students and see So come and see as close as you can to science environment before you close the door totally to explore that. I think you can do that as a young person. And of course, if you feel uncomfortable, if you had bad experiences, perhaps it's okay that you do not go there. That would be tough for you. But I think we sometimes think of science, at least in the public, as something nerdy and narrow, and you have to be very clever. But there's so many aspects of science and so many different science studies, right? So broadening up that perspective, I think, is important.
Yeah, so giving them a diverse view that science is not that scary.
Yes, exactly. Science is for everyone. Science is standing in the nature as a biologist. Science is this microscope work. Science is physics. Science is, it's just so many different aspects of that. And it's for everyone. There's a space for everyone, and you do not have to be intelligent, specifically intelligent. You have to be good in studying at university, but it's not like harder than, and I think us as sometimes scientists like the fact that, here we have to be specifically clever. So we need to destroy that discourse also as scientists to say, well, everyone can do science, and there's a space in science for everyone, and we need different people in science, different mindsets in science.
Because now we celebrate our Disnatalis, especially for our faculty. Now our faculty, how old is 43 years old. Yes, we hope you can give
give us some kind of kind words.
Yes, definitely. First of all, congratulations and happy birthday to
FKIP. Our faculty and teacher training.
That's so nice and so important work that you do. And I really hope that you will continue with having success in recruiting and educating teachers for the future. And also I would hope that we can have some platform for getting inspiration through collaboration, because I think as teachers it's also nice to get different viewpoints. I often think of teaching as you have this pool of knowledge, and then in the classroom you know which tools to apply, and having a toolbox that is bigger and more international can also be helpful. So I hope we can use this visit also as a platform for collaboration. So that would be my hope also for the faculty in the future.
We are looking forward for that, right, Positif, to have an international collaboration. We would like to visit your campus.
Definitely. Come.
Science Education Department, Copenhagen University. Okay. So,
thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.
We're so happy to have you here.
I'm so happy to be here. So thank you, and thank you for listening in, everybody.
Sobat FKIP, itu tadi bincang-bincang kita dengan Profesor Henriette dari Copenhagen University. Bu Septi, kita belajar banyak banget tentang science identity. Apa nih Bu yang bisa di-share lagi nih ke pendengar?
Nah, teman-teman, untuk gabung ke science atau dunia science itu sebenarnya nggak sekaku itu. Biasanya kita mengenal bahwa orang-orang yang ada di dunia science itu strict, kemudian kaku, kelihatan pintar, tapi sebenarnya enggak, teman-teman. Bahwa science itu sangat diverse, dan teman-teman dari background apapun itu bisa bergabung ke dunia science. Science itu luas dan kita bisa explore bersama-sama. Science education.
Promosi ya. Jadi kalau aku sih yang aku tangkap juga science or specific in physics education gitu ya. Jadi bisa nih teman-teman sobat FKIP juga mengetahui lebih dalam apa sih yang dipelajari di tahun pertama, tahun kedua, tahun ketiga. Kita welcome banget untuk itu. Silakan datang ke FKIP Untirta yang ada di Ciwaru ya. Nah, terima kasih untuk sudah mendengarkan podcast ini. Jangan lupa untuk like, subscribe, dan juga komen ya. Terima kasih banyak. Tapi satu jargon nih jangan lupa ya. Oke, kita mulai ya.
Oke.
Untirta Jawara FKIP
Sekolah Jawara Indonesia.